Good afternoon. It is Friday and it's time for our regular Lunch and Learn. Now, today I have a very sad story to tell you. However, it affects all of us. It affects all of us with children, whether we are young people with young children or we're grown ups with children of their own. We're grandparents and great grandparents. All of us love our children. And so this is about depression in children and how we all have a role to play on this. Now, this article was written by a medical doctor who is a pediatrician, and she has some very strong advice for us. And I think that it's something that we all need to know. I know that the older generation, my generation, the generation just above me, are very, very concerned about cell phone usage with our children, whereas our younger parents don't have any kind of concern, doesn't seem to have a whole lot of concern with it. So we're coming at it from different perspectives, but this is a pediatrician's perspective. So I hope that everybody will pay attention to that, please. So she says that she went to the funeral of a patient who died from a drug overdose. She says, "I'm a pediatrician, not an internist. The girl was far too young to die and to be depressed. Her life was filled with trials, but she had great parents and supportive siblings. I want to be very clear here. Her parents did everything right. They were fabulous parents and are in no way responsible for their daughter's death." And that's the really scary part. Sadly, this is a story that has become far too frequent. Now, we know if we look up the death rates, if we look up suicide rates, we're going to see that this suicide rate in the last 2 years has skyrocketed, especially among our young people. So this is not news. This is not, if it is news to you, then I think you've been kind of under a rock here, because the news has been absolutely full of information about how the suicide rate is rising. The doctor says, "I've been in pediatric practice for 32 years and have never seen the prevalence of depression in kids that we see now." She says that a lot of people are putting it off to the current situation with what we're fighting right now, but she says that's partially true. But even before what we're dealing with right now, many teens were primed for this suffering by many factors. So she's saying teens. So the lady, she's a pediatrician, the young lady that died, that she was at the funeral, must have been a teenager. She says, "First of all, our kids have been slowly lulled into emotional and physical isolation over the past decade. If we believe that each of us is born for the purpose of being in relationships with God and loved ones, isolation is devastating, particularly to the young, tender heart. Our need for real connection runs deep. The insidious invasion of screens has shown them a different and easier way to interact with friends. We can think that kids are more connected by text and social media, but this is a ruse. That means it's not true. And we and they know it. Screens cause profound loneliness. We cannot overestimate this. Kids turn to phone to find connection, but they don't deliver, and it leaves the kids feeling worse. Even in adults, I remember being at church a few years ago, and the pastor was talking about how everybody is becoming very egocentric because they are in their own little world with their device. There's all kinds of cartoons, there's all kinds of memes out there with people walking with cricks in their neck, with people in heaven, and they just keep looking down at an empty palm, and the angels are going, I don't know what they're doing. And all of that is indicative to what we are doing as a culture. We are becoming more and more isolated through our screens. Now, the way I'm using my screen today is not what I do every day, and I certainly don't do it all day every day, but I'm reaching out to people that I can't see physically because you're not in my area, and I'm bringing education. I'm not trying to carry on a personal friendship here, although I love you all dearly, and I'm so honored that you are with me on this journey. With our children, it is commonplace for me and my husband to go to a restaurant on Sundays after church. and see families, a family of 4, a family of 6, everybody has their own cell phone and they are glued to the cell phone during dinner. They're not talking with each other. They're not talking about world events. The parents aren't teaching them anything. They're missing that fabulous connectedness that we need as a family. I remember when my children were little, now they're in their 40s, well, late 30s now, and when they were little, no phones were at the table. Of course, we didn't have cell phones back then, but even the regular house phone, if it would ring during dinner, they just have to leave a voicemail because we were not going to give up the personal interaction with our children and let anybody intrude on that family time. You might think that's a bit extreme, but let me just tell you, it was our passion to have great relationships with our children. And so that's what we did. When we went through lockdown and all those kind of things, the struggle to find genuine connection that the kids had before rose dramatically. The current social distancing and problems of that sort escalated isolationism tenfold. Some kids simply couldn't cope. They tried harder to connect by spending more and more time on their devices, but when this failed, many simply withdrew from life. Apart from screens, we've taught kids that independence, uniqueness, and autonomy are laudable qualities. And yes, they are. But she says, keep it in the proper perspective. But we have not done this. We've taught the kids that success is reached when these are acquired without balance, independence, similarity, or mutual work. And what she's saying here is that you do want your children to think for themselves. You do want your children to be able to go out into the world and not be at a disadvantage. But at the same time, as they are growing, as they are maturing, they still need the intervention and the guidance of the parents. So often what we are seeing, even here in the clinic, what I'm seeing with my teenagers is they're not listening to their parents. They don't want to hear what their parents are saying. They're old enough to do it on their own. And so they just shut down others in their life. And this pediatrician says we have taught them to do that. She says when kids refuse advice from their parents, they dress outrageously as they can, and they constantly reject their parents' wisdom. We tell them that they are strong-willed and successful, but we know better, and so do they. Independence at too young an age causes them, the children, to detach from others. Uniqueness drives them into bizarre, it says into bizarre land, that just didn't read right, into bizarre land, and makes them feel ashamed. The autonomy teaches them they need no one, not even good parents or loved ones who care. The result is that they can feel hurt and confused. This just breaks my heart. My parents are still my parents. Thank God they're still alive. And I still take confidence and I take information from them. They'll advise me if I ask them. And normally I'll say, Mom, what do you think? Or Dad, what do you think? And I take what they say to heart. Now, do they have control over my life? No. I'm a full-grown woman, and they should not have control over my life, but I still honor them and listen to them because they are older and wiser than I am in a lot of things, and I would do well to take their word for it and not have to learn hard lessons all by myself. Children, I have been told by more than one, is their perspective can be, well, that was your life. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to find out by myself. Well, you're going to have to relearn those lessons us old people already learned, and we can save you the hassle if you would just listen. The pediatrician goes on to say, fractured families cause inordinate and often lifetime pain for kids. No one wants to hear this, but kids want to say it. They don't do just fine during divorce and many other traumas. They aren't resilient like we want to believe they are. They are children with soft hearts, depending upon adults to make their lives secure. When divorce, sickness, death, or even too much social media hit the ground beneath them, rips without parental help, they simply don't know where to land. Some don't land and they become depressed. So all of these things are traumatic. Moving is traumatic. Changing schools is traumatic. Life happens, trauma happens. My husband died when my children were 15 and 17. It was a traumatic life event. It was not something that could have been prevented, but it was traumatic for all of us. Now we have overcome, thank God we've overcome, but it was a long haul because children are tender. I guess I was a child because I was tender too. And so when these things happen, they can have lifelong consequences, and we don't want that. The doctor goes on, please understand, I'm not pinning depression on parents because the illness is far too complex. Genetics, environment, relationships, pain, and personality all contribute to depression. When a child begins life with many of these against him, one more bout of pain, confusion, or even the wrong friends can trip him up. The best that we can do for our kids is try to control things in their environment that will push them toward depression. This we can do. All right. Now, she's talking here about limiting screen time and even not allowing screen time. Now, I know you don't want to hear that. Well, this is what the doctor is saying, not necessarily me. All right. I'm doing informational purposes, education purposes. This is a pediatrician with 32 years real world experience with children. This is what she deals with. She says, we bow to the mantra that all kids have cell phones and spend too much time on social media, on video games, in their rooms, dabble with drinking and weed. There's nothing we can do about it lest we make them feel like outcasts. She said, these, my friends, talking to us, are none other than excuses that we conduct for ourselves. Let me start over. I'm sorry. These, my friends, are none other than excuses we concoct for ourselves so that we don't have to be the bad guys. I get it. My son and I had knockdown, drag-out fights over video games when he was in high school. I wouldn't allow video games in the house. When he got to college, he thanked us. He saw far too many of his friends spend hours in dark rooms playing video games for $45,000 a year. That means they were not disciplined. They lost themselves in social media. They lost themselves in the media, and they weren't able to get their education. Now, I will just tell you, we did not have video games in my house when my children were little. Why is that? Well, number one, we wanted them to read. We wanted to develop a love for reading. We wanted them to be with us in the family room, having experiences, playing games, watching TV, whatever, with us at home, not isolated in their room. They did not have computers in their rooms. They didn't have televisions in their rooms. They did have a clock radio, and then they got a stereo so they could listen to music while they were in their rooms. But as far as anything visual, they had to come and be with the family because the family is the most important unit on the earth. I'm just going to throw that out there. You might not agree with me, but that's what I say. The doctor goes on to say, as parents and grandparents, I know how hard this is, but it's no excuse for any of us to back away from doing what is right for our kids. At the end of the day, we must make some very difficult decisions and then have the guts to act on them. Do what you can to keep your child from being emotionally isolated. Gradually decrease screen time for kids and for yourself, and increase face-to-face time with them. Encourage your kids to meet in the flesh with their friends. Tell them that they need family, friends, and God. Show them how to connect with friends genuinely. Spend time on the weekends together. Carve out screen-free time for everyone in the family. Talk with your kids. All right. Listen to them, laugh with them, play games with them. I'll just tell you, as a grandparent, when my kids come over with their kids, we don't do video games. We do other things. We take them to the park. We'll play board games with them. We'll do cooking with them. We'll do different things with them. Why? Because we want to make experiences with them. I don't even get on my iPhone or my iPad when they're there. I sit with them. I want them to have an example of me being connected with them so that they, you know, they act like normal children. My father came over, and the little boys particularly were playing in the floor and running around the house and squealing like little children do. And he looked at me, he said, it is so refreshing to see children act like children and not being glued to their devices. Because, of course, he sees what we see when he goes out to restaurants or he goes to church or wherever he goes. He sees that everybody is just, got their face in their device and they're not paying attention. Now, I want to tell you of a true story that I heard this week. A young child, we'll say a preteen child, okay, was kicked out of school, put on 3-day suspension. And why is that? Well, one of his friends sent him a text message saying that her mother had slapped her or did something to her. And the little boy responded, well, let's go kill her. Now, let's go stab her, I think was the exact quote. Of course, the mom got a hold of that. She felt it was threatening. She went to the school. All kinds of yah-yah went on, of course. Now, how did this child come to have that opinion? Well, I was told the story, and as I was told the story, it was because that's what he had seen in his video games. Now, we know that what we take in through the eye, what we take in through the ear is what's going to come out of our mouth. We know that, okay? There is a saying, garbage in, garbage out. We don't want to do that. And so there are some direct ramifications when we just let children have unguarded screen time. I know there are incidences when you've got to let your children have cell phones. When my husband died, my son got a cell phone. Now, back in the day, you could make a phone call and you could text, and that was pretty much all you could do. So there was a lot of safety in that. Right now, I think everybody has a smartphone. You are wide open to the world when you are on the online web. And so what we want to do is we want to put some safeguards for our children. If, as responsible parents that we are, we deem that the children need a phone because in this day and age, you never know what's going to happen and you want to get in contact with them. And I understand that to a certain degree. But I will just tell you, they don't need to be on their phone playing video games. They don't need to be on their phone just with access to anybody and everybody. This is how child trafficking occurs. This is how there's just some other things that occur as well. When children are really, really young, I did my master's degree. I did my thesis on attention deficit disorder. And we know that when people are looking at social media, they're looking at videos, they're playing games, they're on the World Wide Web, and you know this, and you might not be paying attention, but I want the next time you start surfing the web, what's coming this way? What's coming this way? You've got overstimulation, and so it teaches the kids to be distracted because they're going to go at the next bright, shiny object. What we want children to do, we want to train their brain to read in a linear manner, right? Left to right. That's how we want it. That's the way the brain is wired to do that. When children, young children, and I see babies being propped up in their high chair with a cell phone to watch cartoons, what you're doing is you're priming that child to be attention deficit disorder. Please don't do that. Please don't isolate your children, that they get into that situation where their only friends are on the other side of that screen. Those friends can't touch them. Those friends can't hold them. Those friends are not going to be that shoulder to cry on or that person that you hug in celebration when life really does something great for you. She says these tactics, limiting the cell phone, the media, and all that kind of stuff, may not ward off all depression, but they sure are a good start. There's no doubt in my mind, and she's a pediatrician, when we parents that have the power to change the course of our kids' life do so, all right, the parents profoundly impact the course of their kids' lives. When parents kick into gear, the chances that their kids end up in a good place rather than a bad one rises exponentially. For the sake of our kids, let's have the chutzpah to kick in those gears. Is it hard? Yes, it's hard. No one wants to be the bad guy. But I remember my mom telling me, and I tell this to my children, I'm not your friend. I'm your parent. You're going to eat this because this is healthy for you. I don't care that everybody else is going to the fast food restaurant every day of the week. I don't care about that. We don't do that. My mom, she would say, we love Jesus and we don't do that. And so, whatever works for your kids, whatever your family, whatever your values are, as parents, we need to take back control over that. This is not a big thing in my personal life because my children are really, really responsible and their children are being responsible with technology. But I will just tell you, we have children come in to the clinic with their parents and they are on their devices and they have to be entertained because that's just how they've grown up. So when we allow this is this pediatrician. She's been a practicing pediatrician for 31 years. She's got a podcast called Parenting Great Kids. So you might want to look at that. Okay. She's got a website, meekerparenting.com, Meeker. Meg Meeker is the author of that article. She is a pediatrician, guys. She knows about kids' brains. She knows how kids' brains are developing. And what we need to do is we need to follow her lead, do those hard things. If you've already been letting your kids be on social media and the internet 24/7, you've got a big, big task ahead of you. Thankfully, they've got screen controls, they've got internet controls. There's all kinds of things that you can do as a parent to limit access. So please take your responsibility very, very seriously. It would be an absolute tragic shame for your child to feel so isolated and to feel depressed. And then we have to go to a funeral. That would absolutely be devastating. I don't want to ever have to do that. As far as I know, I've never had to do that in my lifetime. I don't want to do that. I have had to go to young people's funerals, but it's been an illness or an accident and that kind of thing. And it's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. But to see a child commit suicide because of depression would be the absolute last thing that I would want to see. And I know that that's your heart too. So let's take this advice from the pediatrician to heart. Let's educate as many people as we can. Share this video, like the video, comment on the video. If you have a different perspective, then feel free. Remember, the pediatrician in no way blamed this little girl's mom, said that the parents had done everything perfectly, but still there was a tragedy. Sometimes that just happens with life, but let's make sure that we do everything in our power in order to prevent that, because it is very, very important. Our children are our greatest legacy. I know you feel that way. I feel like that as well. Share this video, like this video, comment on this video. It's the weekend. Hello. Take good care of yourself. Be sure to do the fun things that you need to do the hard things that you need to do, but nourish yourself so that when Monday comes around and it's back to the work week, that we can enter in with grace and ease. Love you guys. Have a great, great weekend. Well, doesn't want to end.